Hello and welcome to this month's Support Coordinator webinar, proudly brought to you by Endeavour Foundation. I'm Vicky Gray, your host for today's session. Today we will uncover how to empower school leavers through NDIS, community supports and Inclusive Employment Australia, with our guest presenter Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. As we gather online with attendees joining us from across Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the significance of the lands we all call home. If you'd like to honour the traditional custodians of the lands you're logging in from, feel free to share their name in the chat. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people, traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting from today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Endeavour Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, a quick note on housekeeping. Your microphones and cameras will stay off, but we'd love for you to join the discussion in the chat. If you have any questions for our presenters, pop them in the Q&A section and we'll answer them after the presentation. You'll also find a link to our privacy policy in the chat, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions about that. As mentioned earlier, during this webinar, we'll delve into how to empower school leavers through NDIS, community supports and Inclusive Employment Australia. Our presenter today is Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. But before handing you over to Mary, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ian Charlton. Ian is our National Relationship Manager for Inclusive Employment Australia. With 18 years in employment services, he's passionate about helping people reach their goals and showing employers the benefits of hiring people with disability. Over to you, Ian.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I just wanted to go through a few things of, obviously, with DES, the current contract versus the new IEA program. So what with the current DES that we've got at the moment, Disability Employment Services, is there's going to be more flexibility and customised supports for our clients. So with the current contract, you know, some people can have up to 80 participants on their caseload. So we're looking to reduce those to at least 30 or 40 participants. So that's in half. So that gives us more time, more flexibility to work with our participants, reach out to employers, inclusive employers, and educate them around how to help people reach their goals with an intellectual disability. So that gives us more time to work in with them and also our participants. There's also, at the moment, we're going to introduce some different levels of servicing. So obviously at individuals, there can be an intensity level, or there can be a flexible level. So it's more choice for the participant as well. And we help them identify what level they'd like to be at on intensity. So that would be a lot more hands-on to work with their employment goals and their employers, or they might want a flexible service where they choose to when they want to engage with us and when they want our help as well. So there's easier support for employees with disability already in work, so we can go out and provide supports, do some assessments to see if there's any shortfalls, help them and the employer as well to make sure that they're getting the right level of service and identifying where the shortcomings are so that we can continue the employment with the employer and also the participant to reach their goals. There's a greater choice and control in the client service provider at the moment, and with the new program coming in, they can choose who their provider is instead of sort of being put into with the provider that where Centrelink, they'll just choose and go, well, you're going to this provider, so that they can now choose who they go to And with the job plans at the moment, it's a very generic, well, you do this, 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 and this. But with the new program, they get to choose what they want to do and create that job plan with us at Endeavour as well. So great opportunity to change that, and it's more control for them and their plan and their goals. Eligibility is not tied to income support payments anymore, as we're at the moment in DES, you have to be on a payment, some sort of Centrelink payment. They've abolished that now, which is great. So you don't have to be on a payment to access the services. So that opens up a lot more access for people to be able to use the services, which is really great. Also expanding access. So at the current DES, you have to have a capacity when they get an assessment of 8 hours, at least 8 hours, to be able to be eligible to join the program. That is no longer. So if you're under a benchmark of 8 hours, you can actually, access the services, which then opens up a lot of opportunity for different participants as well. So that's a positive. No 2-year period of service limit. So at the moment, once you've been in the program for 2 years, you have to be exited from the program, and you have to go off and get an assessment and be referred back. And that can take time to get those assessments done, and then the participant loses motivation and sort of then weans back off the program. So that is no longer, that just rolls over and continues now, which is really great, so that we can continue the service and work with our participants a lot longer without any interruption. So that's another great benefit to the new program. On to the next one, if that's okay. So supporting the school leavers beyond the October cliff. So that's working in with the schools. So what happens is, obviously, students with intellectual disability often finish school in October, is where their other counterparts will continue on and do their year 12 exams, etc. So our role is to reach out to the schools before that happens, and working with the schools to get these participants signed up with us. So to keep that motivation going with the participant, and some of the impacts, if that doesn't take place, they lose routine and school support. So when they're not at school, they lose routine and fall into that trap, I guess, of just sitting around the house, etc. Parents are forced to adjust their work care roles, so they feel a little bit deflated and feel that they have to do extra additional supports to keep their children motivated. And also financial strain from reduced income as well. So they might have to take time off work to be able to assist them and take them, out to employers, etc. And when that happens, they'll make limited choices and make rush decisions. So our role is to fill that gap, engage with them and their school, and we take them through that process and begin the process of working with them and helping them build resumes, look at employers, look at inclusive employers. That's our role as well, to go out and set those really good standards of how we work with our ID participants. And also we can do some work experience as well to assess and see what the shortfalls are and how we can work together. So some great things there. And our response, obviously our footprint, we've extended our footprint, which is really good. We're currently in Queensland from North Queensland to the Sunshine Coast. However, we've moved into Brisbane Metro, down through to Ipswich, the Gold Coast, Victoria and South Australia. So, our role is to bridge that gap and, help our participants through some pre-employment training, job readiness and supports and work experience. So, so thanks for giving me the time to present to you guys. If you've got any questions, pop that in the chat. Happy to have a look at those and go through them and come back with any questions that you have. But yeah, thanks for your time, and I'll hand it over to you now, Mary.
Hi, everyone, and thanks very much. That was just awesome. I really love the way that you explained the difference from the old program to the new program and what the added value is and the benefits. And something just to be really, really clear about, you talked a lot about, Ian, around participants, and I know language is really quite challenging across our disability sector, the language across different sectors. So when Ian's talking about participants, he's talking about people joining the service. It's for all people with disability, not just those that are on the NDIS. So it's something to be really, really clear about. Okay, I'm actually going to talk about the support coordinator role and how support coordinators can support people with disability and their families through this transition period. Okay, so what are we going to focus on today? Right, here we go. So we're going to be looking at futures planning. What is it? What does it mean within the NDIS context? Learning how to support our families to plan proactively for post-school life. Identifying NDIS supports and community resources available for transitions, and developing strategies to create and monitor a bit of a transition plan. Okay, and also just talking about language, I talk about participants a lot. So when I talk about participants, I'm also talking about their extended network. So whether it's their family, their friends, their nominees, or whoever they consider to be that important person. Okay, let's get moving. So again, if you have any questions for myself or for Ian around the independent employment services or around the support coordinator role, please put them into the Q&A or the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end of the session. Okay, let's get started. Right, so futures planning, what is it and why? So futures planning is a process of, it's really just about looking ahead. I suppose what I find a lot with support coordinators, and support coordinators get really, really busy, we have limited hours, we're really focused on the here and now. What do we need now? What are the priorities? What needs to happen next? But I suppose when working with families, especially when you're working with children or young adults or those transitioning out of school, there's also other transition planning that we can do as well. So futures planning also works around transition. So transitioning from school, if someone is transitioning who wants to in the future move out of home, or anything that's around a specific transition where there needs to be like a plan around the future. What does that look like? What are the goals that you want to achieve? And then it's really coming back and saying, what are the steps we need to take to be able to get there? And I've also talked to a lot of families, or some families, where this isn't done very well and they haven't really thought about it. And then the person leaves school and then they go, wow, I didn't actually think about what was going to happen when my person leaves school. So what's next? So this is really about thinking about a transition is coming up. How do we support families and people with disability to actually start that thinking process and that planning around that person's future? Okay. Let's have a think about futures planning. So the good thing about futures planning is it builds independence and helps young people prepare for greater independence in the future. So learning skills so if their goals are around getting out and volunteering in the community or looking at employment options or training or courses or whatever that might be, then they can start to think about, well, what are the things that I need to do now? So whatever are my skill gaps? Do I need to have travel training, or do I need to start thinking about how to manage my own money, or learning how to self-advocate for themselves? It also promotes confidence and opportunity. So having a plan helps participants and their families explore employment or training or community participation options instead of missing opportunities due to lack of preparation or awareness of what the options might be available. It also supports informed NDIS planning. So coming up for a review, might be looking for a variation of a plan, but by really doing this futures planning and having really clear goals about where that person wants to be in the future, it helps to create really good pathways, and it helps to really be able to source the right supports at the right time. Okay. Remember to use the PowerPoint slides. Okay, let's have a look at what the family's roles are. So families have a really important role in relation to visioning. So families help create a picture of what life after school could look like, whether it could be work, study, friendships, community connections, independent living. They really help that person to have that vision. They're also very good at the encouragement. So they provide motivation, they help to identify strengths and celebrate progress. They work in partnership. So families work alongside the support coordinator, their schools, their providers, their therapy team to ensure that the young person is linked into the right supports at the right time. And they're also that safety net or a safeguard. Families balance aspirations with realistic safeguards. So ensuring that the young person can take positive risks while at the same time remaining supported. Okay, and families look different to everyone. Family could be a traditional family unit, they could be extended families, they could be friends, really strong, connected, informal support networks. So families can mean quite a broad concept. Okay. So let's have a look at the roles of a support coordinator. So a support coordinator's role is to guide and educate. So explaining why it's a really good thing to start thinking about the future. What is it? What is futures planning and why is it really important? Helping families and participants to understand the options available through NDIS funded supports, mainstream services or community supports within their local community. Support coordinators also provide resources to support some of that informed decision making. So they build family and participant capacity. Remembering support coordination is a capacity building role. So they encourage families to think beyond the immediate needs, and that's what I was talking about earlier. These are the person's immediate needs, but imagining what long-term goals for independence or training or community life could look like. Empowering participants to have a voice around their interests and their aspirations, so their plan actually reflects their choices, and coaching families on navigating those NDIS processes. So do we need a plan variation? Is it coming up for a review? Do we need a full reassessment because their support needs have changed? And helping families to prepare evidence for those planning meetings. Support coordinators also coordinate and link in supports. So they connect young people and their families with appropriate providers, such as job coaches or allied health, so psychologists, OTs, speech therapists, or community programs that might be available. They assist in selecting providers that align with the participants' goals and aspirations. So they could be supported employment or open employment pathways, like the programs that Ian's just been talking about. They also ensure services are individualised and not a one-size-fits-all approach. So support coordinators work with the families to really drill down and understand, well, what are their goals? What do they look like? What would need to happen? What supports will they need? How do these person's goals, how are they unique to this person's, and what are those supports that they're going to need to be able to support them to achieve them? They also develop and document a transition plan. So I've talked to some support coordinators about there's so much stuff that we already do. How can we do transition plans on top of this? It's not about an extra job. It's about thinking when a transition stage is coming up, forward thinking and not just thinking about today. So you're working with a family with a young person, might be in year 10 or year 11. Their intention is to leave school in year 12, or their intention might be to leave school in year 10. Forward planning with that family about what are your ideas around when this person leaves school. Okay. So it's working with the families, or there are other professionals out there that all they do is futures planning, long-term, short-term, medium-term, and long-term planning. So helping them to map out what are the short-term goals, what are the medium-term goals, and the long-term goals. And you can do this through the planning that you're already doing. You could develop a specific action plan that really focuses on just that transition period. But clarifying what supports are required and when, what NDIS funded supports are required, what supports are available in the mainstream services, or what's available in the further community. So it's really about looking at a holistic focus around what that person might be able to access. And support coordinators also monitor, review, and revise, and they do that every single day within their jobs. So again, just like any other plans that we put in place, we support families and the participant to track progress against the plan. So how are you going around in relation to volunteering or accessing some volunteering opportunities? How are you going in relation to the psychology support that you're going in relation to developing those skills around developing friendships or really good communication skills with speech pathology? So how are all of these supports coordinated together, supporting you to pursue and achieve your goals? Checking in on a regular basis to identify what's working and where adjustments are needed. Supporting families to request plan changes when a person's circumstances change or their goals change. And keeping the focus on capacity building, so building skills, confidence, and increased independence over time. Okay. So NDIS supports for transition. So let's have a look at what type of supports a participant could possibly access, or a participant of the NDIS through the scheme. Okay, of course, it would need to meet the reasonable necessary criteria, which we all know. So any supports accessed through the NDIS need to meet the reasonable necessary decision-making criteria. So the supports required need to link directly to a participant's unique disability-related support needs. So what are the supports that they need to overcome barriers to accessing employment or volunteering opportunities or accessing additional training or accessing the community? Also needs to be directly related to goals. So what are the goals? What are the outcomes they're hoping to be achieved around increasing skills, access and inclusion with the community, gaining or maintaining employment? Support coordinators also need to explore the gaps in those support needs. So what is the difference between the supports the person is accessing now while attending school, say 5 days a week? And what will that look like when they transition from school? What type of support will they need? And thinking about what are the short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. So some people will have the capacity to go straight into an employment support service and start going through that process. Other people will need to go, well, these are the things that I want to do. Let's focus on skill development first before we go down that path. So everybody will be different. So it's always important to be focusing on a person's goals, what they mean to them, and the outcomes that they want to achieve. This helps to identify the focus for the NDIS support. So it could be like skill development, confidence building, work experience, hands-on support. So it's really important to get very specific about what is the focus, what are the goals, what does it mean to you, and what would it look like if you actually achieve them. It also helps you to measure that progress. So let's have a look at supports available through the NDIS. Okay, employment assistance or capacity building supports. So the purpose of these supports are to help participants explore their work potential, gain confidence, and prepare for meaningful employment. So this support is available as a young person leaves school, changes jobs, or builds a career. So it could include things like work discovery, so exploring what work means and identifying suitable job types, work experience or job trials, foundational skills like building communication, problem solving, time management, and self-confidence. Designing a role around a participant's abilities or employer connections, and even removing barriers like addressing challenges. So it could be around, you might be working with someone who has a psychosocial impairment and they might have very high anxiety. So building skills development around being able to strategies to manage emotions or dealing with the public or addressing some challenges around gaining employment. Supports and employment or core funding. So to provide ongoing and hands-on assistance to people with moderate to high support needs so they can maintain employment. So it could be like on-the-job training, so like learning daily tasks or repetitive tasks for the support worker. Job prompts and routines, so structured supports like developing checklists or reminders or adaptive processes. Behaviour support strategies to manage disability-related needs in the workplace. Assistive technology, so devices to enable participation. Could be like job customisation, so making roles achievable through tailored adjustments. Or work settings, so public, private sector jobs, family businesses, supported employment services, or even volunteering. Okay. So school leaver employment supports. Excuse me. So these are around preparing young people, usually over a 2-year period, to transition from school to employment. So they could be things like intensive skill building, learning time management, teamwork, workplace etiquette, identifying interests and possible job pathways, work trials and placements, so testing out roles in supported environments or building confidence, whether that's socially or emotionally, to be able to access work, or transition readiness, so ensuring participants are prepared to move into inclusive employment Australia options. Okay, further education and training supports. So these are around helping participants to access study at TAFE or university or through apprenticeships. So they could mean things like personal care during classes or placements, assistive technology for study and mobility across settings, transport contributions when public transport isn't an option, or training for staff or employers to understand participant needs. Okay. Community participation supports. These are around building independence, confidence, social connections outside of school and work. So you can see these are really, really broad, and it really highlights the importance to understand that futures planning. When you're doing futures planning, you're really starting to drill down, well, what is it that you actually want to achieve? What are the skills, the confidence, the increased independence you want to gain? What would that look like? So what I'm trying to highlight is it's actually quite varied and very unique to each person. So community participation supports could be things like travel training, so using public transport or travel apps, money management like budgeting and handling payments, teamwork, learning to cooperate and contribute in groups, decision making and problem solving so they can gain autonomy, planning and organising, so developing those executive skills like understanding how to do planning, understand how to, problem solve, or communication and relationships, so building friendships and those networks and connections. Okay, social and recreational supports. These are around supporting participants to join into sports or hobbies or recreational activities. So it might be around specialised or adaptive equipment, could be around skill building, so learning to participate in community or team activities, support workers to assist with personal care or set up for activities, could be transport where public options aren't available. Okay. I'll give you a bit of an example. So a support worker could help a young person, say, prepare for going to a weekly football club. Ensuring that they have the right adaptive equipment and supporting to have more independence and develop these skills when they're socialising within that club. Okay, improve daily living. So to develop functional life skills that build independence at home, in the community or at work. So there could be things like occupational therapy for around cooking, shopping or self-care, speech therapy for communication and workplace readiness, psychology or counselling for confidence and emotional regulation, programs to generalise skills across environments. give you another example. So you could be like a young person may need some speech therapy sessions to improve communication skills so that they can be more effective during job interviews or communicating their supports and needs while they're in supported employment or in an open employment opportunity. Let's have a look at other capacity building supports. So other capacity building supports, obviously, support coordination, linking participants into the right mix of supports, doing that futures planning, doing planning with people, really identifying and drilling down what is it that you're actually needing to support you to achieve those goals. Is it around employment assistance? Is it around supports in employment, further education and training, community participation supports, more therapy supports? Also improved relationships, so behaviour support or to develop strategies around behaviour support plans. Give you an example, just keeping an eye on the time. So say a participant with significant anxiety may receive some kind of behaviour support to manage community participation, combined with support coordination to guide the family through that planning process. Yeah? Okay. Keep going. Let's have a look at transition plans. And again, these are around acknowledging that someone's going through a transition and supporting a family to think about the future. And as support coordinators, we do that. We have these conversations all the time. When we were reviewing plans, when we're coming up for a review, the practice that I like to do is even if a person has a support plan for an NDIS plan for 2 or 3 years, every year at the end of each year or the anniversary of that plan, we go through that planning process. What worked, what didn't work, what would you like to work on next? Okay, so strategies to create and monitor a transition plan. So best transition plans are always person-centered, so built around the young person's voice. They're collaborative, so they involve who's involved in that person's support network. So they involve in the schools, employment providers, if necessary, families, anyone else that's part of that person's support network, or community organisations that might be able to add some value. They're always practical and flexible. So they have clear milestones. So what are the outcomes that you want to achieve and what is the time frame that you want to achieve that within? And always being flexible for change. People's lives change, people's ideas change based on their experiences. Also reviewing and monitoring. There needs to be part of the process. So tracking that progress, having regular check-ins, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to adjust? Having regular check-ins so you can track the progress and celebrate those achievements. This all gets fed into your NDIS reporting. Okay, so the idea around transition planning is to start early and build a shared vision. So engage with the families while the young person's still at school. So have those visioning conversations. So asking the young person and their family about what are your long-term hopes? Where would you like to see your person within 5 years' time? Within the next 6 months, within a year, within 2 years? Getting them to actually think about what would that actually look like and then helping them to vision what that might look like. Linking in some resources, for example, NDIS website has tools like Let's Talk About Work booklet and school leaver employment goals worksheets. There's resources out there. So actually getting out there and doing some research around what resources might actually help families to actually think about the future. And framing the plan around both aspirational. So what's aspirational? What are their dreams and wishes and aspirations, but also what's practical? So balancing those dreams with achievable steps, breaking that down into achievable smaller goals to reach the overall goal. Mapping out the stages and timelines. So breaking the transition into short, medium, and longer term goals. So short-term goals might be things like work experience or travel training, skill development, therapy supports that focus around what their more medium to longer term goals are. Medium-term goals might be things like accessing employment services or volunteering opportunities or thinking about courses that can increase that skill development. Longer-term goals might be around working through an employment process to end up in open employment, or could be even about moving out of home and being more independent within their own home. Using visual tools. So visual tools will look different for different people. I like to do mapping. So I start with the person and then map out what are the goals, what would that look like. So a bit of a mind map, a bit of a visual map. Other people like timelines or checklists, or they might need a bit of a project or an action plan that talks about who's going to be doing what, when, and how. So identifying supports and responsibilities. Okay, coming up to time. So clarifying what the NDIS funds and what it doesn't fund. So the NDIS might fund someone who would be able to coach someone through a process if they were, but they wouldn't be paying for fees, course fees. So connecting to broader support, so Inclusive Employment Australia, TAFE, local volunteering groups, understanding what services they can provide and how they can support the person through that learning opportunity or employment opportunities. Making sure the plans include the support network. So it's not just the support coordinator and the family doing the planning, it needs to include everybody that's part of that support work. So everyone could be working towards the same goals. So including the family, the school, any mainstream services that are linked in with that person, any therapy supports, any community supports. So not just focusing on funded supports. So building a collaboration with those key support network or stakeholders. So building partnerships with schools or therapists, employment services, arranging transition meetings with the families and schools and providers to align with those goals, encouraging the young person's active voice in the planning, which is really, really, really important. So creating a living document. So living documents can be very simple to quite complicated. It really just depends on the person and their family and what they're actually looking for. So it can be easy as just writing something down into like a support plan. It can be an action plan. It can be a transition plan with short, medium, and long-term goals. But again, it's about thinking holistically as opposed to what's just available through the NDIS. Okay, embedding skill building opportunities. So again, focusing on capacity building, not just service access. So travel training or money management, social skill development through community groups, encouraging families to embed that skill development in everyday routines. And again, monitoring progress regularly. So scheduling check-ins, tracking progress against milestones. So where are they at? What's working? What's not working? What can we do differently? These are all things that support coordinators do on a daily basis. Okay, and then reviewing and revising the plan. So revisiting the plan at other key milestones or at key life points. So end of the school year, start of a new job, start of a new plan. Adjusting those supports and goals to meet the changes and needs, encouraging families to celebrate those achievements and update those goals and aspirations. And then lastly, helping families gather evidence for their NDIS planning. So it's reports, assessments based on their goals and their unique disability-related support needs. Providing evidence around those reasonable and necessary supports linked to that person's transition plan. And guiding families through those plan variations. So if they need extra or additional supports. Okay, hopefully that's making sense. We are going to move on to we're right on time, so a Q&A session. So I'm going to have a look at the Q&A. Yeah, load. Okay, just going to try that again. It's just loading. Reload. Okay, it's just loaded. Okay. Shami asks, are uni TAFE supports including an SLS package? Ian, I'm assuming that's a question for you.
Yeah, no, I would have to have a look at that. That's a good question, but definitely have a look. I'm pretty sure that uni may not be involved in that, but we can definitely have a look and come back to that question. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Monica, is this just for participants with intellectual disability? I have quite a few with ASD, but not intellectual disability.
Yeah, so the program that we've been successful in is for ID, intellectual disabilities. However, there are specialist providers that have won contracts around people with ASD, etc. And they will specialise in that. That's why they've turned it into a specialised program. So that the participants that actually go to these providers will get the supports and trained in those areas to assist instead of a generalist scope.
Brilliant. And are you aware of other providers in like New South Wales, WA? Where would people be able to find that information for the IEP programs?
Yep, definitely go to the website, go to the Dual website, and they'll have all the providers that have been successful in each state. So obviously our footprint here in Endeavour, as I said, was Queensland, South Australia and Victoria in parts of those areas, and it'll tell you where we will operate out of. But if you go to the website, you should be able to find one in your local area, etc., for different types of conditions and specialist providers.
Great, awesome. We are in New South Wales. Do you have onboarding process documentation you could share?
Not at present. We're actually working through that at the moment, but once we have all that in place, definitely we will have that, be able to disperse that out, definitely.
Okay. There's a question here. What are the IEA eligibility guidelines for NDIS participants receiving finding and keeping a job supports? Previously, there were DES versus SLES guidelines that specified 6-month overlap. I think you could actually answer that question. So basically what we're going to do with questions that we're not able to answer right now, we will actually pull all that information together and it will be up on the website with a link to the actual watch the recording of the webinar. So anything that needs a bit more in depth, like that question from Daryl, Ian will be able to provide a lot more context and a lot more information on the website, and you'll be sent out a link to this. How is this funded? So IEP, I'm assuming you're asking, Amber, is Ian, do you want to answer that?
Yep. So it's funded from the government. So they are funding the program and offer the the supports around if we need to provide some wage subsidies, etc., or do some modifications in the workplace, etc., as well. So they will help with the funding around that.
Okay. Key supports listed are programs where additional funding is available separate from NDIS package. Sorry, Polly, I'm not quite sure what the question is. Are you saying that the different types of services and supports available are separate from an NDIS package? So IEP is funded by government, so that's completely separate. Anybody with a disability, if you're working with someone with a disability in the community service or anything like that, Ian can provide more information around that. What I was talking about is that for participants of the NDIS, there are so much variety of supports that people can access. Okay, it's not just about employment, it could be about building skills or independence around accessing community, building relationships, getting work ready. Okay, Deborah asks, is this service replacing all DES providers or just select ones? There are many areas not covered. So I'm assuming this EIA are providers and
Yep.
there will be other similar, yes.
Yeah.
Go,
So
Ian.
definitely. No, it's replacing the Disability Employment Services Program, and we'll start on the 1st of November. So, just for a bit of context, in the Disability Employment Services Program, there was over 170 providers, and that's been cut back to around 80, 75 to 80, so over half, to provide a better quality service around that, and that's why they've done the specialist providers as well, so that those people get the supports that they want instead of being just generalist and all put into the same bucket and miss out on that intensive support for employment.
Great. There's another question from Polly, so I think you'll be able to answer that one as well, Ian. Kat asks, is there an example of the living document that can be shared? Kat, not really. A living document can, it really just does depend on the person that you're doing with it or the family that you're doing it. Sometimes they're very, very simple. So they could be really simple about, this is where I'm at now. These are my goals. These are supports that I need to be able to pursue, overcome barriers and achieve these goals. Excuse me. This is where I want to be. So it really, first of all, it's around the process. So the planning process, starting that conversation around what does the future look like for you? We're coming up to a transition stage. You'll be leaving school. What would you like to do when you leave school? What would that look like? What kind of, would you like to increase your skills? Are you going to need to increase independence? Will you need more therapy support? So it's really about thinking about that visioning and starting to have conversations around what the future would look like. And you can document that in a number of ways. I like to use action plans because action plans really are the outcome of that planning. So that you have those conversations, you gather information, you break it down and think what that would look like. So it's really thinking about, where do you want to be? What are the goals? What are the outcomes? What would that look like if you achieve that goal? And then coming back to, well, what are the supports that we would need? What's the length of period, or what are the things that we need to be putting in place? More achievable steps about how to get there. It can be quite intensive or it can be actually quite simple. So a living document just means that it's continuous. You continuously add to it as things change, and that it's really flexible so you can adjust it all the time. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, okay. Sorry, I'm just, okay. Marion asks, what's the best seminar to start doing support coordination in New South Wales? Marion, I'm assuming you're talking about training. Support Coordination Academy has training. You can find it on our website. There's a number of organisations that provide training. If anyone is keen to get into support coordination and be a support coordinator, strongly recommend you go and get training because it's a very specialist role and it can be quite a complex role. Okay. Amber asks, many NDIS providers have historically struggled to support people with invisible disabilities and complex conditions, often doing just enough to tick the box rather than genuinely engaging. What guarantees do we have that the new IEA systems will do better? It would be really good, Ian, if you'll be able to answer that as part of the questions, because I think that would be a really good response. Wanting to point out that support coordinators can be in situations where they have to manage the living grief of parents during this process. Really, really good point, Coral. Like for any people with teenagers transitioning, growing up, our children growing up, there's always that feeling of that we're losing our children or that our people are growing up, that there could be a lot of grief associated with that process. And I think it's something to be really, really, really intuitive of and something to consider, that it's why doing that planning is really helpful, because it really helps us start that conversation, and it really then highlights what supports the families might need or what that person might need. Okay, just keeping an eye on the time. Mainstream employment is often promoted as the gold standard, but for some people it's neither realistic nor appropriate. How will the IEA system ensure supported employment remains viable and well-resourced for those who need it, rather than being treated as a stepping stone that participants are forced out of? Really good question, Amber. Ian will be able to answer that.
Yep,
We're
that's
hearing
fine.
a lot about it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yep. No, that's fine. Yeah. So that's our role, to make sure that we're working with these inclusive employers, and understand the barriers, etc. So when we partner with these employers, that they understand and they're in it to make it work as well. I think with currently some of the participants have been put into roles and set up for failure. But that's where the quality and time that we put in with the participant, and as we've been saying throughout the presentation, to build those stepping stones, etc., and build those blocks first, and make sure that that the participant's got every right to be able to be successful in paid employment. So that's our role, to make sure that quality is high, and so that the employers are working with us and the participants to make it work.
Awesome. And I think, Ian, you'll be able to give some really good examples for some of these questions around some successes and how the changes to the program will make a difference as well, which I think will be really good. Okay.
Yeah, no, 100%.
We're hearing a lot about the important role support coordinators will need to play in transition planning. It's not just about these are. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is that support coordinators often, right, Amber, reduced hours, minimal hours, only get time to really focus on what's happening now and what's happening within the next 6 months or within a plan, that kind of thing. What I'm trying to highlight is that there's also a need to stop and think about, there's a transition coming up. How can I link this person into an organisation that can do some transition planning with them? Or how can we need to be starting to have conversations. So it's really about just opening up opportunities for people to have these conversations. At the same time, NDIS plans are cutting SERs and are shifting towards a navigator model. Navigator model, we're still like a couple of years away from that. We're still trying to suss out what that looks like. My understanding is people are the navigator are starting with the front end, so the general end, people who are not accessing the NDIS, getting support with access, and then they're going to start then working more towards those recommendations around what the NDIS review are talking about with, once people are in the scheme, what will that look like for people with complex support needs? What will that look like with people with the specialist support needs? NDIS review talked a lot about that navigator model. So I suppose support coordinators and the skills that they have, the experience, the rapport that they build up with participants is all going to be valuable to transition into those roles. But again, that's happening over at least another 2-year period. How will participants get the transition support they need if support coordinators don't have the funded time to do the work? There's actually organisations that do this work. So looking at the core budget, using it flexibly, looking at capacity building, finding and keeping a job, looking at supports that might be available to help them with this planning. But again, the planning doesn't need to be highly complex. It's around conversations that we have with families every single day. Okay, what are some good resources to help my participants plan out a roadmap and help them and their families create goals and plans for leaving school and going into the next steps of life? Really good question, Max. I think doing some research on the internet around transition planning, some resources, person-centered planning. There's some really good training around person-centered planning that you can access. And it's really just about thinking around, how do we start those conversations? How do we document what we're talking about? How do we actually then break that down into more achievable steps? Okay. Any recommendations to support school leavers when planners ignore the fact that they are leaving school and will need to be funded for transition supports? Many providers need to know the funding is available prior to making an offer for supported work. Absolutely. Daryl, be firm on your request, have evidence to back up the need for additional supports, including the person's goals and the school offering a modified timetable to support a transition pathway. Planners will push back with not yet type of responses. Well done, Daryl. Being proactive, being really, really clear about what that transition plan looks like. Where are we working towards? What are the goals? Short term, medium term, long term? What are the supports or the skills that need to be developed along that process? Being really clear, being really evidence-based, getting the support network to come in and provide evidence from if there's therapists that will talk about how they're going to work towards that goal. So when the NDIS can see that you've got a coordinated approach across the support network, it makes it easier to get collaborative evidence from the support network that are all working towards the same goal. Okay. I think we're just about running out of time. Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback. Okay. Okay. I think we've just about run out of time. I've got like 4 minutes. I need to stop talking. We will be responding to these questions. So Endeavour will send myself and Ian these questions and we will respond to them again. They will be up on the website. You'll get a link if you've registered for the session and you'll be able to see the questions with the answers as well as access the recording. So thank you very much for coming. We really, really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mary and Ian, for another great session. So many questions, and I can understand completely why it's a minefield. So what Mary said is absolutely correct. We will look at all the questions that you've sent through today. We'll get Mary and Ian to answer those, and we will be sending those through via a link. As from next week. So yeah, next week we'll get an email over to you with the recording of today's session and the PDF of the presentation. Many people were asking for that as well. And that additional resource so that you will be able to have a look at all the questions and answers from today's. So make sure you check your inbox for that one next week. We'd love to invite you all to join us next month in October. Our next webinar, Billable Hours, What's Within and Out of Scope of the Support Coordinator Role, is on Tuesday, the 14th of October at the same time from 12 till 1 AEST. Also, just before we go, we've shared the link to all our webinar recordings on YouTube in the link, in the chat, sorry. So you can catch up on any previous sessions. Again, so much information that Mary gives to everybody each month. We've also dropped the link to our Care Connect monthly newsletter in the chat, which is, again, is full of resources and handy information for support coordinators. On behalf of Endeavour Foundation, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We wish you a fantastic afternoon and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon.